Pow Comic Hour with your hosts, Andrew Bonner
and Chris Ramos.
Tonight, we cover Fantastic Four Full Circle. It literally just came out about a month ago, and this is one of probably the year's best art books slash homages to the Fantastic Four.
Yeah, probably most innovative too is what I was thinking of as far as how it flows and the look of it and the colors and all of that. I think the biggest part of it is, of course, that Alex Ross is involved
Yes.
pretty exclusively on this.
Absolutely. And Alex Ross, we covered earlier in earlier podcast episode when we covered Marvels with our fellow comic book lover, Josh Wilson. And that art style is so much different than the one we're talking about tonight. It's astounding that you could put the two side by side and say, this is the same guy.
Yeah, it's like if you looked at the artwork in Full Circle, it's like these are the pencils. These are his, not like a rough sketch, but Alex Ross is probably more well known as a watercolor artist, a gouache artist, a painter, really realistic colors and just the way that he approaches superheroes as normal beings. Like,
Yes.
how would this look if it was in the street?
Yes, absolutely. He's known for his realism, and also he can, and I think maybe in this book he would be known for his like surrealism, his Andy Warhol influences. In interviews leading up to this and promoting this book, he also cites like Jack Kirby as like a huge influence in him, and that's been like a long spanning thing since he's been in comics, but like he really like goes all in on that. And then Neil Adams was a huge influence on this book and the creation of it.
Yeah, and even just his
Rest in peace, Neil Adams.
Yes. Yeah, it's nice to see, that obviously Neil Adams influenced so many artists and readers, and it just had tons of fans. But it's really nice to hear when people say, well, I was kind of going for like a Neil Adams style.
Yeah.
And that people understand what that means.
Yes,
absolutely. That's really cool.
One
That's
of
his legacy.
like the biggest, he's not bigger than Jack Kirby, obviously, but like Neil Adams was pretty predominant in his field and his artistry and his style. So for another artist to be like, all right, I'm going to do my own like cover version of this song, or, cover version of how this would between my style and his style and Jack Kirby's influence. This is what I came up with.
So Full Circle opens up with the Fantastic Four in their tower in the Baxter Building, and something has infiltrated their defenses. Some intruder has arrived, and for longtime Fantastic Four readers, that's always like
a thump in the night.
Yeah, kind of like impossible to get into the Fantastic Four. They're like super crazy about security, and they always have wacky technology that will alert them.
Yep.
Well, so this being gets inside their building, and so everyone comes rushing out. One thing I really liked just right off the bat is the Thing and the Human Torch.
Yes.
And then of course Mr. Fantastic and the Invisible Woman, but they all are like, I think it sounds weird to say they're in character, but they're all immediately like it almost takes you back to any Fantastic Four comic you've ever read, and they're all acting how they should.
Absolutely. So Stan Lee and Jack Kirby had their infamous run back in the mid to late 60s, and it still is very well regarded, holds up to this day. There's like a 4 omnibus set. It's great. And that, Alex Ross, he really is a huge fanboy, and it doesn't matter how big you get in your career, you still honor who your influences are and things like that. So when he's writing this book, after we both had a discussion in our little pre-show discussion, and he really hones in on this authenticity to the 1960s, like Stan Lee, Jack Kirby style.
Yeah. And
storytelling.
They don't have them where they're swearing or anything like that.
No.
They keep true to what I think the family. Everyone calls it
Yes.
Marvel's first family. The
Hmm.
family aspect of it is that, even though they are related, but they're also friends. And what makes their comic wholesome is their ability to work together and just the scientific end of it. And
Yes.
I think Alex Ross kind of like bridges both of those. He takes a lot of the mechanics and like electronics end from Kirby. Like
Oh
you notice
yeah,
that right
absolutely.
away.
Yeah.
Crazy
It has a little Kirby
perspective.
crackle in the
Yep.
end. Yeah. Yeah.
And just the way that um, I think that even the way the pages are laid out at the beginning, and
Yes.
then it kind of goes a little off the off
Right.
kilter
Let's see.
later
No,
on.
where is this going? Yeah. So they reintroduce Alex Ross reintroduces this character after this intruder stumbles in on the night and just collapses, and Thing picks him up. He's like, okay, bring him to the table. All right, check him out. So this character, this stranger, he's kind of covered in this black cloak of darkness, but it's kind of got like spider webs. And we recognize this character. Fantastic Four readers will know him as being this villain as character from This Man, This Monster that came out in 1966.
Yeah. So Alex Ross is like, I'm going to take this guy and
Yeah.
make him in my book. Again, Alex Ross wrote this and illustrated it. So this was a story that he just really wanted to tell. In some interviews, he's even saying he just needed to tell this. This has been on his mind for a long time. So
Yeah. He pitched it to Marvel, and Marvel kind of was like, I don't know what we're going to do with this.
like, where would we put it?
Yeah, exactly. So instead of like waiting, I get maybe it was just he didn't want to wait around so long and maybe explore other avenues. But this was not published traditionally by Marvel Comics. It was published by Abrams Comic Arts, and it's a different publisher, but still goes back to the Marvel family. I think.
Yeah, and they're still using like all Marvel things, so
Yeah,
they must have just given him permission to get this off of his plate.
yeah.
I'm sure that his life and art board is very busy, so when
Hmm.
he had time to work on it, he worked on it.
Yeah.
And
Alex Ross doesn't traditionally do interiors anymore. He hasn't did interiors for like what since Kingdom Come,
long time, yeah.
Justice, things like that.
He's mostly doing like you would
He's a cover
probably
artist. Yeah.
know him, yeah, more of a cover artist, but he also tries to do like group
Oh
portraits
yes,
almost to say
absolutely.
like this is the Justice League and this
Yeah,
is
he did the
you know
Snapshot series like
yeah.
recently. Yeah.
And he's really well known for drawing like all of the guys that are superheroes differently than all the girls who are superheroes. Like sometimes it looks like real cookie cutter,
Oh sure.
like this is a muscular guy, and then I'm just gonna
Yeah.
put this suit on, and there's another muscular
It's
guy, I'm gonna put this suit on. So
right.
he kind of made them. I don't want to say gave them more of their humanity, but he gave them more of their own like physique and
Sure.
their
I
personality.
think, and his art's kind of when he does those styles, it's regarded as like fine art,
Right.
right? So when he goes back to interiors, it's kind of like going back to his roots and going back to the days of Marvels and Kingdom Come and Earth X and things like that. So it's really cool to bring it back home.
Yeah. So then, as the story progresses, the Fantastic Four realizes that this is a threat to them, that this intruder was actually somewhat of a sleeping organism
Yeah,
horde
absolutely.
thing that,
Yeah, the things are like spewing out of him. They're like creatures spewing out. They're like, oh, where's this coming from? And they're so familiar with the negative zone. And so the negative zone in Marvel Comics is like an antimatter universe, however you wanted to think about that.
it's a totally different universe, and some of the most popular groups that use it are the Fantastic Four.
Yeah,
They're always
exactly. Yeah.
like, no, the negatives. Other people don't
Right.
really think about it. Other groups like
No.
the X-Men, I don't think ever think about
No.
it.
I think it doesn't really come up until like Annihilation Conquest,
It's almost like
things like
the
that. It's
Fantastic
cosmic.
Four has a duty to keep the negative zone secluded and secured,
Sure. So
so it doesn't overrun like Earth.
yeah.
But it's sort of like a side dimension of hell, sort of like an idea of that.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's
Sure.
like hard to
Yeah.
explain,
It's
but
it's
it's a
a
negative
yeah.
part
It's
of
not a
us.
parallel universe, but it's a universe within a universe. Alex Ross does a great job of explaining it. um, but it's really cool how the four characters are dealing with these aliens. Like Alex Ross redraws, or I guess keeps within, the Human Torch as this like embodiment of flame. And Susan Storm, she's using her abilities to conceal like bubbles of these creatures, things just pounding the way. Reed's trying to figure out a solution to the problem, and they're just trying to hold them off, just in classic like Fantastic Four style.
I thought what was cool is that Invisible Woman was a lot of people think the Invisible Woman is super mega powerful, and she
She
is.
is.
I mean, she can come up with these invisible spheres or just do
Yeah.
like a force field around herself or around
Yeah.
someone else. I mean, she could do a force field around your head and then you won't be able
Yeah.
to breathe. I mean, she's super
Yep.
super mega strong,
Yeah.
and she's trying to encapsulate all of these monsters. They're just like little critters flying all over the place, and she's like, Reed, I can't contain them all. I'm losing visibility, and I know how that sounds coming from me.
Right.
So people who are longtime readers would see that if Susan Storm is starting to get stressed out, that's a lot, So even though Alex Ross can't draw all of this and show all of the just insanity that's
Yeah.
happening, he uses some of those dialogues to just sort of drive it home to say that
Absolutely.
she's overwhelmed.
Yeah. And what's the cool thing about this is I guess and one of the most prominent aspects besides how well it's drawn is the use of color.
Yeah.
I think we have to talk about that.
Yeah.
So, like orange and yellow, and maybe a reddish pink are some of the earliest colors that you see in this book that just vibrant energy. And it's like you don't see that in a lot of modern day comic telling or even like Image Comics, and maybe a little bit here and there, but this is just like a so vibrant. And it's not like there's a sun. It's like a light source within the book. Maybe it's coming out from like the ceiling or electricity or things like that, or from the flame. But he loves playing with that color just to stand out, make a statement.
Yeah, and like some of the walls and other things, they just start changing colors as you're going through.
Yeah,
So he uses the different tones to kind of like push perspective
absolutely.
and make his characters pop. And his
Yeah.
almost in every page is every page is a work of art on its own,
Yes.
but the characters are always right up front, and their line at work is always like the thickest, and it's just bold. They're obviously right next to the quote unquote camera.
Yeah.
So he's really, really obviously fine tuned his character work.
For sure. And it was funny. So watching interviews from him and some of cartoon kayfabe and a couple other followers out there of like they're more in tune with the comic world and things like that and have experience in the field. They knew that from hearing from Alex Ross that apparently he was so focused on the caricatures or the figures or however you want to put that, that backgrounds to him were like a last minute, like, oh, I have to put a background together. Which you're looking at the page and you're like, oh, that background looks fantastic. It tells a story and within itself. And the paneling is so cool to look at. And you're telling me that the hardest part of this page was the background and not the character, the figures? Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
So even Alex Ross, who we regarded, high standards, he struggles with even things.
Yeah, no, and it's really is a nice book that's coming together. He shows his incredible skill, which no one
Yeah.
has ever doubted. And then
But just to try different style.
and as the book is going through, they kind of start talking about traveling into the negative zone. They talk about
Yes.
like now we're going to make this leap into this unknown
They
dimension.
get new
And
costumes.
yeah, they get some costumes on that Reed Richards has made. So it's great to see that they've adapted to what they're doing, and it kind of has that old school feel of like gear up. You're
Right.
getting ready to
Even
go
like
here.
what was it there before they leap into the negative zone? They're like, "Oh, shouldn't we take a vehicle? We don't need vehicles where we're going." And you just see like the classic like a fantastic car and another like
Yeah,
vehicle they travel around in, and I'm like, oh, that's super cool to see that and pay tribute to that and
just to
all
see
those
that everyone has
concepts.
their own feel as a team.
Oh, absolutely. And then like there's like that leap into the negative zone where like things get like wobbly and crazy and distorted. And he takes out like color out of it, the page too. It's like, wow, that's so cool.
And Johnny Storm makes a comment that says, um, we don't want to get stuck.
Yeah.
And so he says, I know I, for one, don't want to get stuck in there again for what felt like forever. So it helps to kind of ground when this comic is. There was a time where Johnny did get stuck in the negative zone in comics world, and that was a few years ago. So we at least know that it's past that point,
Hmm.
which is nice because it doesn't open up in the comic saying 1972 or something like that.
Right.
You kind of have to do that almost with any comic you're reading is
Oh,
kind of feel like
absolutely.
where in continuity does this
Sure.
land?
And it's starting to become another cool writing um tool and everything that you don't necessarily have to continue in the next guy's story. You could pick a point like Peter David with his Spider-Man story. He picked a time when Spider-Man was just in his black costume. And he said, oh, my story exists within this time period. It doesn't mean that it came out during that time period. I created it right now, but it happened during this aspect. And I thought Alex Ross was going for that, but then we kind of find out through more context clues and a little research that it could be like a we can kind of figure out when in continuity roughly it is. So
Yeah.
that's really cool to point out.
And so they're traveling through into the negative zone. And when they're there, they kind of have to work their way through this alien environment.
Yeah.
And you see each one of them sort of using the skills that they have. The
Yeah.
invisible woman makes everyone invisible.
Yep.
And it's like the whole team has to kind of hold back Ben Grimm, the thing,
Yes.
'cause he's
From
just,
Spanish.
he's
Yeah.
very smashy. He's very
Yep.
like, throw me
Exactly.
at
And
him,
he's kind
throw
of
me at
freaking
him.
out. He's a little paranoid. There's a really cool panel when we get to see a very larger than life character in the Fantastic Four world, Annihilus. He's eating like these black creatures that we got to see earlier. He's eating them in the negative zone, so he's like huge, like in perspective wise. But like Invisible Woman, she enshrouds our heroes in and invisibility. So we get to just F6 right through everything.
Yeah.
We just get to like go through, sneak through. And it's so cool just to see that huge splash page. And he's not even a villain in it. It just comes across. It's just, hey, he's there in the negative zone.
Yeah, like since he's so close to the camera and they're so far away, Alex Ross makes it like this
Yeah.
is how important he is.
Right.
I'm going to devote
Exactly.
this entire spread to just him
Yes.
sitting there. He is definitely one of the biggest bad guys um, in the Marvel universe, and definitely one of the biggest next to Doctor Doom, I think, for
Right.
them.
And then Alex Ross slowly starts to invert the colors. So instead of all these yellows and oranges, like yellow, and it's almost like a neon green. Now he goes to like his purples and his reds, and he starts to like make a spooky cult like textures and color scheme.
And he kind of, as we saw a little video of him working on one of the art pages, and he is still doing the traditional pen and ink
Yes.
and the brush and ink. But I think in this, and I have not looked it up, but I think what he did was he did all his pencils and then um, did pen and ink over all of his black spots.
Yeah.
And then maybe went back in with watercolor or gouache or something and then colored in each of those areas.
Sure.
He's very hands on. I would be surprised if he went digital on this. I think
Hmm.
this was definitely an art painting
Yeah.
technique for him, and,
Sure.
and you get a lot of that painterly feel. But he's not like thick with his paint. He does a lot of that
Yeah.
watercolor, acrylic kind of thing.
Right. I like the page. Yeah, it says "Oy vey," or the things like "Oy vey." What kind of horror show is this? Fairy thing, he's such a character, and yeah, so we kind of encounter like this big bad, um, the Nega Man, and it's like a character from like Reed's past. They kind of argue back and forth, and it was really cool just kind of see like what horror aspects he can kind of channel, and that spooky energy that they can hone in on.
Yeah, and like when they're being held captive,
Yeah,
Mega Man says, "You are my living vessels waiting to be filled. You will bring us back to Earth with you. What a glorious scene we'll make."
right,
As he's sort of like corrupting them, and
exactly.
the Invisible Woman says, "So that's it? Thank goodness. I thought it might have been something we haven't dealt with before."
Right.
So it shows that they're fearless to the end,
Oh,
and
absolutely.
as a
Talks to their
team,
experience of what
yes,
they've handled.
as a team, they know that each other has their back. I mean, so they kind of pull out of it. She is definitely a major player in this book.
Oh,
She does a
absolutely.
great, great, great job.
Yeah, and she's kind of like a narrator or somebody that like reinforces the reader, "Hey, we got this."
Hmm.
So that was really cool. And just seeing how well it flowed, just seamlessly. It's like Alex Ross, like he's read so much Fantastic Four. He's like, oh, I got this. I know what these characters would say. Um, so cool. Just how they encounter each other and how they're fighting off, like in the fighting scene where they're just squashing bad like aliens and stuff.
Well, and that's where I got a lot of that Neil Adams, um, uh, when he's saying he was kind of inspired by Neil Adams.
Sure.
It's like they're thrown all over the page, and then some of the panels are crooked themselves, and then
Yeah.
you have a full page, and then you have like a quarter page, and then you have angles and perspective changes, and
Absolutely.
the people are the camera's like underneath them, and then it's above them, and it really is a big change from when you think of like Kirby and everyone else. I mean,
Sure.
he had big strong characters, but he wasn't flipping them all over the place.
Absolutely. And then so they kind of, battle against Mega Man a little bit, and then they kind of get thrown across the space, and all of a sudden they encounter Nega Earth, I guess you would call it, or anti. Oh no, they call it
Anti-Earth.
anti-Earth. Yep, I was close. Earth
Anti-Earth.
that exists within the negative zone, like it has all the countries. It's he does a really good job of like putting the oceans like kind of like in there, and it's like it's almost a parallel universe that exists within the negative zone.
And it's made out of negative
Energy.
energy, and so that's where Mr. Fantastic is saying, you know this is the antimatter
Yeah.
universe, which is the negative
Right.
energy, and that's how it's sort of surviving, where it's
Yeah.
similar but different.
Exactly. And Reed, he can't just ignore something and just
I
go,
know.
we'll leave it over there. He's like, well, we're here. We
Yeah,
might as well
we
explore
gotta
it.
go check this out.
And then,
Okay.
they coordinate, between all of our powers, we can get there safe. We just have to do a lot of coordinating right now. And they're like, I don't know. He's like, oh, trust me. You trust me, right? Last time we trusted you, we went into space, we got hit by cosmic rays, and now we're here. I guess, well, yeah, we'll do it. Sure. Okay.
Yeah, and so it is cool that no matter what comes up, and that's why I
Yep.
think what Alex Ross was kind of pushing, as far as I need to tell this story because these are my favorite characters.
Yeah.
And anytime you have a story with the Fantastic Four, they need to all be there, and they need to all be contributing a piece of their,
Absolutely.
powers, and that's always been their story, is that these four parts make a whole.
Absolutely. They're Marvel's first family, after all. So they kind of journey. They get to Earth, the anti-Earth safely, and they kind of see, oh, this ain't so bad, okay. And then they run into like some weird like other superheroes and a guy in a suit of armor, and you're like, wait, I don't quite understand you. Translator comes along, and here it is, the guy from the beginning of the book. Spoilers. But spoiler, not spoiler, but it is the guy that is from the beginning of the book that we got to see from This Man, This Monster. So it's a whole story, aka full circle.
Yeah.
Because last time we encountered him in This Man, This Monster, he is falling to this anti-Earth. We don't know it's anti-Earth at the time, but he's just falling in the negative zone. And he saves Reed Richards, as like his last heroic act after thinking, oh, he's like a villain, he wants to redeem himself. So we kind of see him pick up in a new life and wanting to become better themselves and kind of thanking Reed and the Fantastic Four for everything he's done, especially the Thing. He kind of embraces them as like an idol or an icon to look up to or something like that. And it's really cool just to see, how we got to hear from there.
Well, and I think that that's not um, too uncommon for people in the comic book industry to look back on comics that were written over the last 50 years
Yeah.
and saying, hey, where are there gaps that we can pull a story from?
Oh, absolutely. Sure.
Where was there like a villain that appeared and then mysteriously disappeared? Is there still a story there? Is there something to be salvaged? And
Yes.
Alex Ross is smart enough to do his research because he's always looking at comics.
Mm-hmm.
He's always looking at like what they looked like in the Silver Age and the 60s, 70s, 80s. I mean, a lot of his
Yeah.
paintings are of that era. He does
Yes.
a lot of like the X-Men when they were sort of the younger years and
Mm-hmm.
stuff. So I think he really likes that nostalgic feel. He doesn't want that to die.
Yeah, absolutely.
So he wants to bring back some of that. And I think he's the perfect guy to find a character like this that was part of such a
Yeah.
strong storyline and saying, hey, you know what? Let's continue his story. It's
Yeah,
not
let's see
done.
what he's doing. What's he doing
Yeah.
today?
Like, I got an idea. This is what he's doing.
Sure. So it's really cool, and they reunite with the family. We get to see Franklin and Valerie, their kids, of the Fantastic Four, reunited, and they all kind of explain like the repercussions and the larger like gratitudes of, hey, we just went to like this infinite cosmos and the negative zone and we came back. Whoa, wasn't that freaky? So it was really cool, and they just kind of went, oh, I wonder what it all reveals about guiding hand over our lives. Are we merely playthings to some greater forces? We're home. We're safe. Can you just be happy for once?
Yeah. It's like, Reed, turn off your brain. Stop questioning everything.
We just looked in the infinite and came back. Like, calm down.
Yeah. And the Thing is always like, and then it ends with him like going
Yeah.
back to his sandwich, which is
Yeah.
So-
He's so much of a grounded character.
But the fun part of it, is like, this was a day in the life of the Fantastic Four.
Yeah.
It was just sort of like they woke up, never thought something like this would happen. It
Yep.
did. They all jumped into it. They worked together. They found a way out. And now it's like, okay, we'll see you tomorrow.
Yeah.
it'll-
Like nothing ever.
See you in the morning.
See you in the morning. Yeah. So it's been really cool to, see this book come out, to get it. It's a little hard to come by these days, but if you can, they'll probably do another print run, I'm sure. The slipcase edition came out with a few extras, but that's really hard to get. But
I'm sure your local comic shop should be a
Yes.
first place for you to check out,
absolutely.
see what they got.
And like Hoopla, and I'm sure maybe some of the other digital comic book resources will start getting it too. And we hope you can enjoy this book and story, original graphic novel that however you can get it.
Yeah. Anything like this that comes up when it's like an artist, writer, and illustrator and an original story, we're all over.
Absolutely. And Alex Ross, he is the guy. He's our Midwestern guy, and he studied at the Chicago Comics Institute. You can still, he does some appearances here and there, and we really enjoy his work, and we can't wait to see what he does next. It's really cool just to look back, and even old artists such as Alex, he's not really considered old, but he's established artists do new things.
Yeah.
And it's really cool to see people reinvent themselves.
They want to stretch their wings just as much.
Absolutely. So this has been another great episode of Bam Pow Comic Hour. Thanks for tuning in. This is Andrew Bonner
And Chris Ramos.
signing off.